Ciao.
On a bright May day, former President Lyndon Johnson walked with Richard Nixon, his successor, to a platform just south of the new building that bore Johnson's name. And they
Texas thing, I don't think. Have you ever noticed how states love small government unless it's theirs? Or conversely, how they hate big government unless it's theirs?
Have I noticed it? I live it. I mean...
Well, I think every state lives that, though, don't they?
Well, okay, so for the entirety of... Maybe so, but Texas does it bigger, right? So for the entirety of the Obama administration, our governor, who was then lieutenant governor, said... Or not, I'm sorry, he was then attorney general. He said, this is what I do for my job. I get up, I go into the office, I sue the Obama administration, I go home. That's literally... He was proud of that. And then Trump gets elected, and he's like... How can we help you? And now Biden's in, and it's like the next guy who's attorney general, who's also indicted on several felony counts, is, you know, so the sort of the whiplash, and with the winter storm and the pandemic, the amount of whiplash in Texas, again, which I have to write about every single day, is astonishing.
That is the voice of Shelly Brisbin, by the way. Shelly Brisbin, who is... What is your position on the Standard? Host of Parallel, first of all. So look for that wherever you look for podcasts, host of Parallel. But on the Standard, what are you called?
At the Texas Standard, my title is web editor or digital editor. I also produce some segments. I produce our weekly technology segment and other various segments. But if you want to put it on a business card, web editor would be the title. Okay. I need to search up some of your tech segments for the Texas Standard, because I did listen to, you and I were talking a couple of days ago off mic about the piece you did for the about the LBJ Library, the 50th anniversary of the opening of the library. Kind of disappointed when I was listening to that to hear that it's still closed. Because, you know, we're post-pandemic. Everything's open now. Disneyland's open. It's all
the library in San Francisco is open again. The new Beverly over in Hollywood is going to be opening, I think, in the middle of June, showing movies again. Limited capacity, of course, you know, distance, all that things. But it was sort of surprising to hear that the LBJ Library was like, yeah, we're gonna keep things closed for a while. I would think that your governor might actually have a problem with that being the case, because
fun fact,
everything's normal now.
The LBJ Presidential Library, like all presidential libraries, and this is something I might have known, but I learned in the course of doing that story. Those are all federally owned. They're owned by the National Archives.
Really?
And so the LBJ Library happens to be on the University of Texas campus,
right?
But it is owned by the federal government. UT donated the land. In fact, the reason it got built as quickly as it did, let's just go down a LBJ rabbit hole, but not too long. The reason it got built as quickly as it did is UT in the middle of Johnson's presidency said, hello, we'd like that library. Here's some land. And the National Archives and the LBJ Foundation that was raising money was like, okay, we can do this.
So the library itself is owned by the federal government.
Right.
Because I would have assumed that a lot of the contents were, but I would think that the building would belong to wherever the building was.
No, because the building and the people who work there are all, you know, associated with the federal government, with the National Archives. And so whatever policies and rules and stuff about not only when they're going to open and when they're not, but how the archives are managed, all of that is, you know, unified under the federal government. So all those libraries have raised millions and millions of dollars to build those buildings, and essentially that's the way it works, is that the foundations for the presidents will raise the money to build those buildings, and then they essentially donate it to the American people via the federal government.
Let me ask you one more question about that, because we actually do, well, we don't have a tech topic today, but I'm curious, is there a book or anything that you found in researching the stuff about the LBJ Library, just about how the libraries in general are made or built or whatever? Because I was fascinated to find that Lady Bird Johnson took a look at one of them. Was it Eisenhower or Truman?
Truman. Yeah. She went on a tour of several of them. Yeah,
and she was disappointed to find that, the body of his work was really not represented in the library, at least not the part that people saw.
His papers were in like gray boxes and stuff, and she looked at that and she's like, that's boring.
Yeah.
So let's you know what we'll do? Let's put it in big red archive boxes with presidential seals on them, and then let's create this big open shelving plan on the upper floors of the library so that when you walk into the library, you see rows and rows and rows of big archive boxes with papers. So it's this whole visual thing. The LBJ Library was kind of the first big sort of big picture, big library. They not only physically big, but they just sort of did it on a grander scale. And after that, presidents went, oh, that's how you do that. Yeah. And the Kennedy Library didn't even exist when the LBJ Library was built for reasons I don't really know why that was. But subsequently, when they built it, apparently that's quite a grand library. And some of the newer ones are pretty grand as well.
I've heard good things about the Nixon Library. A friend of mine went. He's like, I got no respect for Nixon. I got no use for him. But man alive, that library is amazing. Which I'm like, okay, well, that's cool.
All
anyway,
right, well.
This is absolutely the kind of thing that people tune in for, by the way. I hope it is, because it's basically the kind of thing that we're doing today. I joked a minute ago that the pandemic's over because, it's not. And yet it kind of is. You're fully vaxxed?
I am.
All right. What'd you get?
I got the Pfizer. Okay. And
how'd that treat you?
Just fine.
Okay.
After the second, I was very sleepy. Like I had heard the anecdote. You always hear all this anecdotal stuff about, oh, you're going to have negative effects.
Yeah.
My arm was sore, no biggie.
Okay.
And I heard that the older you are, the more severe your side effects tend to be. So I was like, I'm not 25 anymore.
I heard the opposite of that.
Really?
That old people are having no problem. My mom was like a little sleepy the next day, and my mom, I don't mind telling you, a few years older than I am. So she had some issues with the second shot, I think, but no issues. Like she was just like a little tired. That was it. I, on the other hand, got knocked out for a day and a half.
I had planned to take the day off just because I had heard all this stuff about side effects. And I said, even if I allow myself to get freaked out by it, the best that can happen is I'll get to sit and watch movies all day long. Oh, darn, I took a day off.
Yeah.
And as it was, I just slept half the day.
Yeah.
It was fine.
Yeah, that's kind of what I did too. So, and so now, but you've had your 2 weeks after it and all that stuff, so you're fine.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm I guess a little more than a month out.
Oh, okay.
My husband and I both he's like a week ahead of me, I think. And so, well, first we took my mom to get vaxxed in like February, and then he did it the next month. And then so we sort of, as a family, staggered our vaccinations. And then my sister and her family got vaxxed. So that's the fun thing, too, because you're wanting to say to your family members, I'd really like to see you. Please tell me your vaccination status.
Yeah.
And it wasn't that it was awkward. It was just sort of a funny question to feel like I had to ask. So
yeah. Texas being Texas, although it's kind of weird because I'm writing to a friend of mine in Connecticut. We're writing back and forth because I'm in California. You're in Texas. She's in Connecticut. She and I are both like, we're going really fast back to everybody come outside and play. Or everybody go inside and play. And I'm curious, first of all, how has the reopening been where you are? My sense is Texas was, kind of like walking around half the time with its fingers in its ears going, everything's fine, come out and play anyway. How has the reopening been where you are? And then I'm curious about stuff that you've actually done now that you feel safer to do so.
If you know anything about Austin, you know that it's always the outlier where Texas is concerned. And so if things are more conservative or more red, to use the political parlance, in other parts of Texas, Austin is less so. And so around here, the local governments were continuing to have mask mandates and capacity restrictions that the governor, who actually, and I don't think it's controversial at all to say that the governor likes tweaking Austin's nose specifically. And so when Austin was saying, we're going to keep our mask requirement, the governor began issuing executive orders that basically said you can't do that. And now we're to the point where he says no government entities can require masks indoors or have capacity, or restaurants or businesses can't have capacity restrictions. So basically that's all been rolled back. I think my sense, and I've talked to people in other parts of Texas, particularly in rural Texas, because we have, reporters and people that we talk to who are not in big cities. My sense is that Austin has generally made the choice to keep its masks on longer. That doesn't mean people aren't going out to play. In fact, I went out a couple of weeks ago to an outdoor place and met a bunch of coworkers, and we sat outside. Most of us we all arrived with our masks. We sat outside at picnic tables. We socially distanced in little groups. As the evening went along, we were a little looser with our masks, and we ended up taking them off so that we could have a drink and eat and the like. Mm-hmm. And it was sort of weird as a social phenomenon. All of us, and we again, like the question of asking people whether they've been vaccinated or not is sort of an interesting one. We, in the course of our meeting daily on Zoom, have sort of told each other our vax status. So pretty much everybody in that group knew where everybody else was. And we had all been, said we're fully vaccinated. So unless somebody's not telling the truth, which I don't think is the case, mm-hmm. we were all a vaccinated group of people. And it was great. And it didn't feel like the pandemic is over now, but it did feel like a little bit at first. It was like, should I be doing this? I don't know. Yeah. But it got easier.
I went to a comic book shop.
Wow.
That was it. Yeah, that's pretty much what I did, because I have actually been to that comic book shop once since the whole pandemic started. And it was a comic book shop that I was going to every now and then. I liked the fact that they were there. And during the pandemic, I wanted to support them, right? But I didn't want to turn up every week and just like browse around. But now that I'm fully vaccinated, I went the other day and just to browse around. And again, to support them. Like, I went not knowing what I wanted to buy, but I knew I wanted to buy something because I know it can't have been the easiest time in the world for them. And so I chipped in. I had planned to chip in $30. I ended up chipping in $28 because they were running a fantastic sale. So I got two things, and it was still for less. Yeah, probably so, which I didn't even know about. I just went because I wanted to kind of help them out. The other thing that's kind of weird is, because the CDC came out and said nobody has to wear a mask inside anymore if you're socially distanced and whatever. And they can't make that rule. They can't make that law. And my grocery store still has a, wear a mask, socially distance, all that stuff. But there are people who aren't now. And it's kind of like, well, I wish you would, but I'm not going to fight you. Which, honestly, 6 months ago, yes. Right. Not physically fought them, but 6 months ago, we might have exchanged words. And I was like... Strongly worded glare or something like that. Yeah. Oh, well, no, not even... No. Not glare. What's the best way to put it? My reticence to use 4-letter words publicly fell considerably. In certain situations, in certain settings. And it turns out if I have a mask and you don't, I felt fairly comfortable making sure that I could say things that, normally I would just mouth so you could read my lips. Yeah. But not, not violent.
I will say I was kind of prepared. I have not been in that situation, not saying that I wouldn't have been, mm-hmm. but the places I've gone during the pandemic, whether it was to pick up to-go food or to go someplace where I was going to eat outdoors, which we've done to support local businesses that we like you, and a couple of businesses that we've tried to support throughout the pandemic are still alive. And I'm so excited because they're just lovely people, and they did everything they possibly could creatively. My sort of an aside, but a place that we would often go for breakfast on Saturdays, what they did very early in the pandemic when grocery shortages were still a thing, was mm-hmm. they put together bags of groceries. And for like $25, you could get a bag that had some produce and some eggs and some bread and some milk. They would tell you what all's in the grocery bag. And if you were going to come there for your coffee anyway, here's a grocery bag. And it helped them, through that period. But they're open, and they still have signs that basically say, we'd really prefer if you wear a mask. They still have their tables more distance than they did at one time. They also have a really big outside deck. They're starting to have music outside. So I feel like, they're moving forward. But I don't think if you ask them, and their employees are still wearing masks. And I feel like that's a courtesy thing. My guess is those folks are vaccinated. Because getting vaccines is pretty easy these days around here in this city, I should say. There are probably rural areas where it's a little harder, but I feel like, the businesses I go in, I see employees with masks. I see some people with them, some people without them. But in general, I feel like I live in a little bit of a bubble because, as I say, I've talked to people in rural areas of Texas where throughout the pandemic, people didn't wear masks. For some, it was a political thing. For some, it was, I'm living in tiny town and tiny town doesn't have any COVID. Oh, it does? Well, I'm not going to wear a mask anyway. There was a lot of denial.
Yeah. Yeah, if you ask my dad, by the way, who lives in like a town that has, I want to say, less than 2,000 people, he had COVID in November of 2019.
Oh, wow.
It's like, wow, okay, I'm pretty sure either you're a time traveler or you're wrong.